Huh? Can you hear us now? యా ఈ పేజ్ ఓపెన్ చేయలేదు ఎందుకు? వేరే పేజ్ ఓపెన్ చేస్తారు, ఇది ఓపెన్ చేయలేదా? ఏం ఇబ్బంది అయింది? Yes, now you can hear us, isn't it? Okay, so 29 dot D. Indian dot blogspot. ఇప్పుడు connection is reset. Something happened from that end. Anyway, it's opening in the other places, isn't it? I think Sushma's presentation is opening from your individual mobiles, isn't it? Hopefully. So Sushma will just present it from her memory, and we will raise the questions around this patient. So yes, Sushma, go on. Continue. No. Oh yeah. Yeah, just give us the highlights of this patient. The symptoms and the signs.
Bilateral lower limb swelling since 1 year. Pitting type progressive in nature. No dyspnea on exertion. No distension of abdomen. No history of fever. A month after his edema began, the patient sought a consultation with a general practitioner in his village who told him that he had a kidney problem. When asked specifically, he denied a history of fever, sore throat, rash, hematuria, cough or expectoration. He also denied a history of night sweats. The patient, however, reported a profound fatigue. Later on, his sister, who reported to us that his fatigue was grossly apparent for last 6 months to 1 year, and that his work in fields reduced to simply providing emotional support to others. There was no history of weight loss or loss of appetite, as the patient can't recall much beyond the past 3 months.
And did he develop distension of the abdomen later?
Yes, sir. Distension of abdomen since 1 month. He denies a history of jaundice, pain abdomen, or chest pain, hemoptysis, or hematemesis. He is unsure of his bowel habits.
So I think we have a patient having slow progression of edema since the last 1 year, and since the last 1 month he's progressed to developing distension of the abdomen. And I think all of you have seen that picture on examination of this patient of the distension of abdomen and the pedal, pitting pedal edema. The pictures are all there for you to see. We're not able to present it again here right now. So this is the general examination and the abdominal examination. Now we spent a lot of time that day on the chest examination. The last time we were taking another patient of approach to pulmonary disorders. So approach to GI disorders and abdominal particularly. In this patient, if you see the picture, it's a very well distended abdomen, very typical of fluid. And one of the most important points here is the everted umbilicus, which I think you can make out in the picture. So now that we think that there is fluid, we can do some more tests like doing a fluid thrill or a shifting dullness. So generally when you have fluid thrill, you may not have shifting dullness. Looking at this patient's abdomen, it looks like you are more likely to get a fluid thrill here because it's looking quite tensely distended. Whereas if you have shifting dullness, you may not have the fluid thrill. And the other way around also. When you have the fluid thrill, you may not have the shifting dullness. So I think we found the fluid thrill when we saw him, and we took out a lot of fluid from his abdomen. How many liters?
500 ml on one day, and yesterday 500 ml.
So 500 1 liter we took out, not much, and we sent it for investigations, and we also did some more testing. So what do you think? I mean, what can explain his symptoms of pedal edema and ascites that we have? In fact, we have lined up 3 patients of pedal edema and ascites for you, and all of them would have slightly different causes. So what do you think could be the reason for this patient's pili and ascites? Anybody on the message board? And how do we rule out one by one the common causes of such pili and ascites? In the previous, yes, somebody is saying hypoalbuminemia, that is Swarupa, isn't it? Swarupa? Yes, Swarupa is saying hypoalbuminemia, yes. But what could be the other causes? And how will you know whether she has hypoalbuminemia? Short of a very expensive testing for serum albumin, which will ask you as to how it is done. So somebody is saying hepatic cause. So by hepatic cause, do you mean hypoalbuminemia again, or what other hepatic cause other than hypoalbuminemia can cause this kind of a problem? So we know, yes, cirrhosis of the liver is a hepatic cause, and if there is a liver failure, the albumin will also not be synthesized. So do you think he has got a liver failure and the albumin is not being synthesized, and that is why he is having this edema? In which case, what are the other things he would have had to, if he was a liver disease causing this problem? So yes, I think we have to rule out, if we look at Starling's forces, so either it's a hydrostatic pressure or it's a low colloidal osmotic pressure. So if it is a low colloidal osmotic pressure, we have to think of hypoalbuminemia. And if it is a hydrostatic pressure rise, then we have to think of heart failure. So how do we rule out a liver disease causing hypoalbuminemia or something else, and a cause of hydrostatic pressure like heart failure? So we have talked about a lot about heart failure in the previous classes, particularly because of lung causes. So I'm sure some of you can tell us how to rule out heart failure in this patient. Yeah, before we jump to the investigation, we're still in the clinical findings. So clinically, can we rule out heart failure? Yes, so who is this? Bhavna. Bhavna is saying that increased JVP we'll have to look for. So Dr. Shushma, did we look for increased JVP?
Yes, JVP is normal.
JVP is normal by Dr. Shushma. So Dr. Bhavna, what shall we look for now? So heart failure is less likely, isn't it? Can it still be acute heart failure? I mean, can you have heart failure without raised JVP? And if then, what kind of a heart failure will not have raised JVP? Let's see who can answer this question. We had a little rehearsal before we came, and we ran all these questions with our interns and PGs, and some of them they could answer, some of them they couldn't. And we told them that you would be answering all of them, the ones which they could not. So what kind of heart failure will not have raised JVP? Yeah, okay, so you all are not able to answer this, but okay, non-congestive, very good. Chitra is saying non-congestive. So what are non-congestive heart failures? Oh, what is this? Okay, Pallavi has been rejected. So Chitra, what is non-congestive heart failure? You are right. So obviously we see the JVP when there is a congestion of the JVP, which means that congestion is a raised pressure coming from just below the jugular venous pressure. We have the superior vena cava. So superior vena cava pressure is high. Then that is coming because the right atrial pressure is high. That is coming because the right ventricular pressure is high. And that is happening because the left atrial pressure is high. Okay, now Chitra is saying when there is no pulmonary edema and right heart failure. Okay, we won't say no pulmonary edema, but yes, when there is no right heart failure. So what kind of failure is no right heart failure? And when does that happen? So if you have a chronic left ventricular failure, will that not lead to right heart failure? Yes, Srivalli, if you have a chronic left ventricular failure, will that not lead to right heart failure? That will also lead to right heart failure, isn't it? So what will not lead to right heart failure? An acute left ventricular failure. So the answer is acute left ventricular failure. You will not see the raised JVP. But in acute left ventricular failure, what kind of a patient would Shushma have got? A patient who would have been very breathless, gasping for breath, almost dying. So that is not an acute left ventricular failure either. So the absence of JVP and the absence of very severe shortness of breath and acute left ventricular failure tells us that it's probably not a heart failure related ascites or edema. So we move to other causes like liver failure or liver disease causing ascites. So how do we rule that out? Yes, 8 semesters. How do we rule out liver disease in this patient? What are the examination findings of a liver disease which he doesn't have or he may have? Yeah, Simran, not investigation. No, we are still in the clinical findings. Jaundice, very good, Sakshi. Yes, jaundice, icterus, Divya. So he doesn't have jaundice, Sushma?
No, sir.
Yes, what else does he not have? Which will tell us it is not a liver disease. Distended abdominal veins, very good. So that is another thing we'll come to soon. So when do we have distended abdominal veins and does it indicate liver disease? What does it indicate? So good question raised by Sivalli. Very good. But somebody has to answer it. Okay. So hepatomegaly in a liver disease may not happen always, Chitra, because you may have cirrhosis of liver, which is the liver is shrunken. So Srivalli is saying portal hypertension, we will have distal abdominal veins. Yes, good. So, but then we were talking about is anasarca and ascites. So how to look for liver disease per se? Or maybe Srivalli is saying that he has got portal hypertension alone, and in which case he still may have some features of. So do you think it's a non-hepatic portal hypertension, really? Okay, Chitra is saying uncontrollable bleeding, right? She had this man had some gum bleeding, so bleeding is one feature. What else? Raised portal venous pressure. How? Yeah, like so. Many of you are saying that it may be portal hypertension, but clinically, how to make it know that this is portal hypertension and not, IVC, or it is not a pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary hypertension we ruled out, but then we have so many other causes of this anasarca, not just portal hypertension. So, are there any hard features of portal hypertension that we can look for clinically? Okay, Sakshi, what indicates a raised portal venous pressure? Uncontrolled bleeding, fine. He has some bleeding, but that is a bleeding disorder because of what? Maybe clotting factors. So that indicates liver failure, but not portal pressure. Okay, so we have to make our minds. There are some features of liver failure. There may be some features of portal hypertension. So we have to say liver failure. So I think all of you are saying liver failure now. So Swarupa is saying asterixis. Yes, this man had asterixis when he came. No, he did not have. Sorry, he did not have. That is another patient. And Caput Medici, of course, portal hypertension. He does not have any prominent portal veins on his abdomen. So that is one feature of portal hypertension he doesn't have. That's a good point, which you all have brought out. Okay, he doesn't have esophageal varices and hematemesis either. So that there goes another point in favor of portal hypertension. Good. So all these are good points that you're making of no portal hypertension features. So this man doesn't have any features of portal hypertension. He doesn't have some features of liver failure, which you all pointed out, like jaundice is a feature of excretory function defect. Asterixis is a feature of what kind of liver failure? The liver is unable to metabolize the ammonia. So that's why the ammonia is going to the brain and he is developing the flaps. So that is also not happening in this patient. What are the other markers of chronic liver failure? Yes, splenomegaly actually is another feature of portal hypertension. So we have to distinguish between portal hypertension and liver failure here. So yes, he does not have any other feature of portal hypertension, all those that you mentioned. And what are the other features of liver failure that he does not have? There are some more features which none of you have mentioned yet. Hepatic encephalopathy, okay, good, he doesn't have that. Black cholesterol is another bleeding feature. Thrombocytopenia is bleeding. May or may not be seen in liver failure. Bleeding can be due to clotting factor deficiency in liver failure. Sometimes, yes, because of portal hypertension, splenomegaly, you can have thrombocytopenia because of that, which is also known as hypersplenism. So none of these in this patient. What are other cutaneous stigmata of liver disease? Chronic gynecomastia, yes, Divya. Now we have hit upon that. Yeah, pruritus in liver failure. It's more of a chronic renal failure feature. But yeah, skin changes like spider nevi, yes, Sakshi, Divya, gynecomastia, spider nevi, good. So what are the other features of increased histones which the livers are not able to metabolize? Palmar edema, yes. Yeah, now you got the clue. Now you're on the right track. So all these are the features of inability of the liver to metabolize the histones, and so they're accumulating and causing dilatation of the blood vessels in the skin capillaries, causing gynecomastia. So what is the definition of gynecomastia? So did we check his breasts?
Yes, sir. Normal.
Yeah, normal means how much breast tissue does a male need to have to qualify for gynecomastia? Anyone? Yeah, more than 3 centimeters of breast tissue. So in him, we did not find even 1 to 2 centimeters of breast tissue. And other than gynecomastia, anything similar, spider angioma, anything else? So we didn't find any spiders in him. Another point, testicular atrophy. That's a very important point for histamine deficiency. So did we examine his testes? We forgot to examine his testes, isn't it? We don't like examining testes, so we didn't examine it. But we should have. That's a very, very important thing which doctors should not forget. Okay, what else? Anything in the skin? Anything else? In the hands, other than palmar erythema? What is written here? What? Ah, good, very good, Sakshi. Reduce axillary and pubic hair. Yes, that is also another feature of histone deficiency. Anything in the hands? I don't know whether you have said that already. So Dupuytren's contracture is the other thing, isn't it? Very common. So none of these chronic uterine stigmata liver disease was seen in this patient. He was only having pedal ascites and nothing else. So we have ruled out heart failure. We have kind of not thinking of liver failure. Any bedside test that can tell us whether he is having hypoalbuminemia due to renal loss, which is the only other thing we can think of. So yeah, clubbing in liver disease is fine. And so any other bedside test that you can do, which will tell you as to whether he has hypoalbuminemia due to renal loss. Bedside. What is that? Huh? Paracentesis. No, paracentesis is not a test for renal loss. That will not tell us anything about the kidneys. Yeah, proteinuria. So what bedside test can you do to detect proteinuria? We have given you the urine of this patient. No, we haven't given you a dipstick. But you can ask for something else which is available in your house. You can do it right now. If you can put the urine to your house, you can do the test without any dipstick. Heat, yes. Heat test. Yeah, all of you can heat the urine and see. Put it in a test tube and heat it. So which part of the test tube will you heat? Will you start heating from below or above? Upper part, yes, good. And when it becomes cloudy, what will you do to find out whether it's becoming cloudy or not? Okay, I think more or less you have got the entire thing. So we did this urinary albumin in a proper way, quantitating it. And we found that it was in the nephrotic range, isn't it? And that is how much? 2.5 in this man. So normally by definition of nephrotic syndrome, all of you know that it is more than 3.5 gram per 1.73 meter square of body surface area. But in this man, 2.5 would qualify to be nephrotic syndrome because his body surface area is also less, much less than 1.73 meter square. So definitely he has got severe nephrotic syndrome, which we also found that his serum albumin is very low, 1.3. So severe nephrotic syndrome. So what could be the reason for this? And what more can we do? And can any of you tell us as to how we do the quantitative estimation of albumin both in the serum as well as the urine? How is it done? What is the method? Okay, it will take some time to type it out, or maybe some quick Google and copy pasting, which we don't want. So fine, we will put that question as a homework. How is albumin estimated in the lab? 24-hour urinary protein albumin as well as the serum albumin. So that is one thing. So he definitely has got nephrotic syndrome. There is no doubt about it. And the question that we have given as an assignment here is, what is the next step in managing this patient? Okay, so Simran is saying we can do a SAG. Well, SAG, will it help us? That will help us in what way? Either it is a high SAG, it will either be high or low. If it is high, you will think of portal hypertension. If it is low, you will think of peritonitis. But we are not thinking of either of them here. Neither are we thinking of portal hypertension nor peritonitis. So maybe doing a SAG will not be really helpful, although we did it and it turned out to be low. Huh? That is low, isn't it? 0.9, yeah. So nephrotic syndrome, actually, there's no point in doing the SAG bit out because often it is confusing. Because what would you expect in nephrotic syndrome? You won't expect a total hypertension. It is happening because of low albumin. So if it is because of low albumin, you would expect neither a high SAG nor a low SAG. Actually, nephrotic syndrome is just outside this category of SAG. It is not taken in the SAG bracket at all. SAG is only to see either portal hypertensive or non-portal hypertensive like inflammation. So which nephrotic syndrome is neither. So there's no point in seeing the SAG in nephrotic syndrome. Although it's 0.9, it is not actually inflammatory in nephrotic syndrome. So nephrotic syndrome is an exception to the SAG rule. We need not do SAG in nephrotic syndrome at all. All right. But what can we do for him now? I mean, to manage him, to help him. Yeah, bioreactor somebody is saying, I don't know what it is and how you can actually quantify it. So, as I said, maybe later you can share it in the group, in the WhatsApp text. Because you'll need some time to actually explain how it is done. Yes, anyone can tell us how to further manage this patient. So basically, we want to look for the cause as to why it happened. Again, is this young man, 48-year-old, was okay 1 year back and suddenly developed a problem in his kidneys. So before that, you have to know also what are the causes of nephrotic syndrome. What leads to this glomerular injury which causes proteinuria? So in medicine, it's very simple. There are only few causes. Like either it's inflammation due to an immune-mediated cause, or it's because of infection. Infection can be viral, bacterial, protozoal, fungal. So you'll have to tell us. You'll have to search for some causes of infectious causes of nephrotic syndrome. I'm sure all of you know about the protozoa which causes nephrotic syndrome because that's an MCQ. Okay. Other than that, you would learn about a lot about. You have already learned in pathology a lot about immune complex deposition causing nephrotic syndrome, glomerular damage. And we've also learned in pathology about different primary glomerulonephritis, which are essentially the stages of glomerular involvement, like minimal change, membranous, membranoproliferative, mesangiocapillary, and then focal segmental, and finally glomerulosclerosis. So it kind of progresses in these stages, and finally the kidney is completely, non-functional, and the patient develops azotemia, and then we have to take him up for renal replacement therapy. So that is one bad outcome this patient may have with or without treatment, because whatever treatment modalities we have in nephrotic syndrome, there's a lot of controversy around each one of them. They're not in black and white efficacy. Like you cannot say I'll give steroid and the patient will improve. Nothing like that. You cannot say I'll give mycophenolate mefloquine and he will improve, or azathioprine he will improve. Whatever be the renal biopsy stage of the disease, it will be really difficult to say. But yes, one thing renal biopsy will tell us that if it is FSGS, it's already progressed a lot and is less likely to improve. If it is minimal change, he may still improve, and that improvement could be either because of treatment or spontaneous. So we can try all those, but we won't be really sure of what is going to help him here. So with that, I think it is time to move to the other patient with an abdominal problem, which is Dr. Swati's patient, which you will be able to open, I think, in this place, in your computer screen. So do you know how to open that? Yeah, that one. You have to just make it bigger and yeah. No, you can open that tab. No, is the same tab. Okay, so you can open another tab there above. Yeah. It's already there. Just click. Yeah, it's opened. So all of you can see this for 57-year-old man with jaundice. You have to share. So how do you share it with them? We don't know how to. Can you call Vineet, that person? How to share it with them? So our helper is just leaving the show all the time. We're losing valuable time. But of course, she must be bored of this bad lecture. Yes, can you show us how to share this with them? Yeah, in a smaller window so that we can see the others, particularly the message board. Ah, small window, yes. Yes, of course, all of you can see it in your mobile phone also, but when it is here, it helps us as well because we can also see it. Particularly those who have not opened our mobile phones and yeah. Small window opening up. Yeah. So the small window has opened and I hope everybody is able to see it. And yeah, now Swati, can you just open the entire page by scrolling down and clicking on read more? And read more, yes. All of you can see this? I can't see your message board completely. Yeah, are any of you messaging us? Maybe we should press and show all messages. Are the messages visible? The fresh messages? Huh? Click on show all. Chat. Okay, yeah. So no messages for us yet. Okay, so now, yeah, right. All right. I guess both the windows don't open together, message and chat. All right, Swati, so quick.
A 57-year-old male RMP by occupation with the 2 children. Patient is chronic alcoholic since 40 years. Daily 80 ml of whiskey taken and occasionally toddy. Patient is non-smoker, non-diabetic and non-hypertensive. No history of CVA, TB and asthma. Patient is obese with gross abdominal obesity. Patient was apparently asymptomatic 3 years ago. Then he noticed yellowish discoloration of eyes, bilateral pedal edema, which is spitting type, extending up to knees, and abdominal distension. Then he went to the local hospital and got LFT done, which showed mild dearrangement. Then he had bleeding gums.
So the previous patient was 1 year of pedal edema. This patient is 3 years of pedal edema. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, and then he had bleeding gums also 3 years back.
Yes, sir.
Or 2 days back. 2 days back, it seems.
At that time.
Okay. So 3 years he was just having pedal edema and he was doing certain things for the pedal edema. And abdominal distension when they developed. He did not notice because anyway the abdomen was quite distended with obesity. And so 2 days back he had all his problems, is it? Current problems? And he was a regular consumer alcohol. 1.5 year back, patient developed gradual increase in right lower limb swelling. Okay, we're still in the limb swelling. And he had some local rise of temperature in the limb and skin thickening was there. He had blebs before that. Okay, yes. So something is brewing in his skin. All right. So let's look at the examination findings. So somebody did a debridement also in that part, isn't it? Actually, we have given the investigation above the examination finding. Okay, doesn't matter. Outside, they are all outside. So we will just go into the clinical details. Now, what do we see in the eyes of this patient? Anyone can use the message box? What is visible in the eyes? So they are showing the lower bulbar conjunctiva, but you can also see the bulbar conjunctiva to a certain extent. The lower bulbar, if at all. Come down further. Yeah, here's another lower palpebral and lower bulbar. Yes, any messages? What do we see in the eyes? Anything visible in the eyes? To any of you clinicians out there? No, what is it? No, don't worry. Just scroll down. You have the scroll bar there. Acha, we can scroll down this also. Yeah, we are not scrolling down, maybe. Yeah, there's a scroll bar there and you just pull it down. No, there. See, no, on the right side there's a scroll bar. That one. See, it's moving down. Just pull it down. Yeah, anyway, Chitra is saying Victor S. Ectropion also she is saying. Yes, so Divya, Chitra, who is this? Sai. Yeah, all of them said icterus. Yes, we agree with you. Icterus and pallor, somebody said. Yeah, actually, there's this trick question. Can we see both icterus and pallor, or can we see pallor in the presence of icterus? This is often a trick question asked in the exam. And the answer is no. I don't know why, but I guess you can't see pallor here because it's all yellow. So you can't see white on top of yellow. Okay, now come down a bit. That's the simple logic which I can find. Now come down. Yeah, let's see the other features. Yeah, now you're seeing the upper bulbar conjunctiva. So a lot of time we have spent on the eyes. Come down. Yes, now his legs. Something in his legs. I don't know. We are not seeing the picture very well from our end. I don't know how you are seeing it. Maybe you are seeing them better. Come down a bit. Yes, so some big ulceration on the shin area of the skin. And if you look at the skin also, there's a lot of orange-like piping on the surface of the skin, what is also known as in English peau d'orange and in French peau d'orange. So something like that is there. What does that suggest? Come down. It's probably that is what it's showing here as well. Although this picture I can't make out. Left leg, right leg. Okay. Come down. Is there any other examining? Look at his abdomen. So what does the peau d'orange or peau d'orange suggest to any of you? Lymphedema, very good. Who is this? Simran. Yes, Srivalli. Yes, lymphatic obstruction. So all these 3 years or 1.5 years of recurrent inflammation of the skin was possibly responsible for the elephantiasis-like legs he has developed. If you look at his legs, if you could have had an opportunity to see him directly, it was more like a very Edematous elephant-like legs with all the typical skin cutaneous features of peau d'orange, also seen in elephants, and classical nickname of elephantiasis. But yeah, it's not because of the common tropical filariasis that we have. In fact, it would have been unilateral in that case. Here it's more of a bilateral cellulitis which he has been developing. Why he has been developing the cellulitis, how is it related to his problems is something that we are not sure. He's not diabetic, isn't it? Yeah, it's very strange that with that huge truncal obesity, he's not diabetic. Yeah, good thing. I mean, even when the current is gone, everything is working. The mic is also working. Yes. So now we come to his abdomen. Look at the shape of the abdomen. The previous abdomen that we showed you, it was also similar and it was much more distended and shiny. Here also it's distended and you can look at the umbilicus. It seems to be coming out to a certain extent, but not as much as it was in the previous patient. So previous patient has more of fluid. This patient also has a lot of fat and he was obese for a long time. So in this patient it's very difficult to make out whether it's fat or fluid causing this. Now we come to other findings in this patient. What are the other findings? Do we have any pictures or would you like to tell us the other findings, Swati? Yeah, tell us.
Video is this, sir.
Video, show us a video if there is anything. I guess many of you have seen the video. Yeah, what is this? So Chitra was asking, is there a history of leprosy for lymphatic blockage? Would you expect that kind of lymphedema with leprosy? Yeah, what is this showing? Yes, anyone? Anyone, could you see that video? Oh, this video was on YouTube, is it? So through that it must have gone. What is it written? Clonus. Well, clonus in the wrist joint is something, yeah, not demonstrated as of now. But yeah, fine tremors is another thing. But do you think it is fine? Because fine is more like you hold out the hand and you put a page on top of it, and then the page goes into a fine vibratory motion. Because otherwise you can't even see fine tremors. You actually cannot make a video of fine tremors well. So yes, it's a flapping tremor asterixis, as many of them are saying. Yes, it is a flapping tremor. And what is it suggestive of? This is suggestive of increased ammonia in the brain. And how is increased ammonia causing this flapping tremor? Very interesting CNS pathway, which is dependent or responsive to the ammonia, and which gives rise to this. So maybe some of you, I'll leave that as a homework to find out what kind of a CNS pathway causes this. Okay. Yes. Now, is there any other finding? So we have seen icterus, we have seen flapping tremor as a feature of hepatic encephalopathy, liver failure. Icterus is a feature of excretory function defect of the liver, and any other, and clotting factor deficiencies possibly clinically. Bleeding. You've seen some bleeding manifestations in his legs and all those. So features of liver failure are there. What we haven't seen is gynecomastia, testicular atrophy, Dupuytren's contracture, Palmer-Ehrlichia, Spider-Nevi. We haven't seen any of these in this patient. And it's not that you always see all the other findings. So that is there. But we now know, unlike the previous patient of crudolidema and ascites due to nephrotic syndrome, this patient is probably not nephrotic syndrome. And although even he has got a very severely reduced albumin, like is it 2.3 or something? Oh, 1.6, very, very reduced, just like nephrotic syndrome. But this albumin is probably synthetic function defect of the liver. Because the liver is unable to synthesize it, that's why it is 1.6. So you have a synthetic problem in the liver here and liver failure causing all his problems. So why has he gone into liver failure? So liver has been damaged systematically due to a long drawn history of toxin consumption. And the commonest toxin responsible for this is alcohol. So it's a very classical alcoholic cirrhosis with possibly alcoholic hepatitis and ongoing liver cell failure because of all due to the effects of alcohol. So here, of course, the management is still slightly easier in the sense, although it's more of symptomatic, we have tackled his ammonia levels in the brain by reducing the ammonia by taking it out from his gut. So we have cleaned his gut completely by giving him bowel wash twice a day, and we have given him lactulose, which not only cleans the gut, but it also converts the soluble ammonia to insoluble ammonium ions. So that's another mechanism of lactulose. So if it is not getting absorbed by the portal circulation, the ammonia load comes down. So we are reducing ammonia load, and he has made a remarkable recovery. When he came to us, he was all drowsy, unable to speak to us. But after 2-3 days with Dr. Chandana and Dr. Swati's and Dr. Sushma's care, he became quite alright and he was able to talk to us. In fact, because he was himself a doctor, he started giving us management directions as to how we should do this and that. And it was quite well. We knew that he was quite well and almost ready to go home. But yes, this was not the end of his journey. Like if his liver doesn't recover completely and if it goes back to liver failure again, and we have just controlled his ammonia levels, we have not done anything for the liver to become better. In fact, he was still requiring 10 FFPs nearly per day. But his prothrombin time was more than 1. A normal prothrombin time should be 15 seconds only. His prothrombin time was more than 1 minute. So he was that way in a very bad shape. His liver failure was not at all responding to anything that we could do. And of course, there was nothing else to do because we know that the liver failure, there is no currently treatment available for liver failure. The only thing we can do is a liver transplant. But there are many issues to getting a liver transplant for somebody who is self-damaging his liver. So we only hope that time will solve it and his liver will recover given the time that it gets to recover when he does not consume alcohol, if he does not consume alcohol. The only problem is whoever has come to us in such state in the past, by experience, we haven't found a single person who has been able to give it up. So it's a kind of a very downward spiral, and the most important thing to manage is alcoholism, which is quite difficult as borne by our experiences. So I'll leave Dr. Chandana here to wrap up the discussion on the learning points today as to what we have learned, and of course any of the questions that you can ask, please put it here as well as on the WhatsApp group. Then we can keep answering them. So over to Dr. Chandana, and Dr. Chandana, you can also give it to others.
Here are the two patients presented with ascites and pedal edema. Yeah, we have to first think about the cardiac causes and look for the raised AVP or cardiac features, and then liver and then kidney. For signs of liver failure like alopecia, Peter hepaticus, spider nevi, Dupuytren's contractures, Palmer erythema, all these are signs of liver failure. And in one patient, we had asterixis and constrictional apraxia also, and bleeding manifestations. So we went towards the liver side. And in other patient, we had hypoalbuminemia, hyperlipidemia, and also albumin loss in the urine. So we went towards the nephrotic side. So this is how we approach an ascites and pedal edema case. Thank you.